Hi, this is Amanda for Lavinia World, and today we're going to be doing a Christmas wreath builder card with Lavinia Stamps. So I have my little DIY wreath builder stencil here, and you'll notice that I have a little piece of acetate behind it that has some sort of like grid marks on it. I did that to help me with positioning my stamps. So I'm going to start off with the mistletoe stamp from Lavinia Stamps, and I am stamping that in Evergreen Bough, Distress Oxide. I'm going to be stamping all of my stamps 2 times to get a good impression, and don't worry, I won't be showing you all the stamping because wreath building is rather repetitive. But just in case there was anybody that isn't familiar with the wreath builder here, I did want to show this first one, all the turns of it. So you stamp it and then you turn the paper, and then you stamp it and turn the paper. Now you can do this 8 times. You can do the what's called the diamond orientation, but for this wreath, I'm just going to do the square orientation. So as you can see, my paper is like a square. If I were to turn it on its side so it looked like a diamond, that would be the diamond orientation. So you can do 8 stampings to make a wreath if you wish. This particular stamp was awfully big for that, so I decided not to do this one. And then when I did the other stampings, I just decided that it would be kind of busy if I did 8 stamps on those. So I just continued on with the square orientation for all of my stampings. So we're going to finish up the 4th stamping to kind of show you the starts of our wreath here. And that is going to be the last stamping for this mistletoe stamp. And what you see in my hand here is a cheap dry erase board eraser. And that's just going to give me some even pressure on my stamp. I got that from Jennifer McGuire. It's a little tip. So I am covering my stamping here in Ranger Clear embossing powder. I'm going to do that for all my stamping, but this is the only time I'm actually going to show it on camera. So just a little FYI there. So now we're going to move on to the mini holly stamp, and I'm going to be stamping that in Lucky Clover. So for the rest of the stamping, just so because it's awfully repetitive here, I am just going to show the first stamp and then kind of the partial of the last stamping, just to show you the stamp that I'm using and the color of oxide that I'm using. Just to kind of show you, get you an idea of what I'm doing here, but not show the repetitive nature of all the stamping. So there you go, that's the holly. Now we're moving on to the mini pine cone, and I'm using Vintage Photo for this. So we're going to show the first stamping, and then like I said, we're just going to show the last little bit of this last stamp here. Excuse me. So for the pine cone, I did kind of overlap with the mistletoe. So I will show you what I did to kind of fix that a little bit so we don't have our brown and our green. There we go. I brought out a Q-tip, and I'm just wiping off the brown ink off my embossing just so it didn't, I thought it would look funny if I embossed over that. So I'm just going to wipe that off so it looks like the pine cone is behind those mistletoe leaves there. And then I did, again, clear heat emboss that. So I wanted to bring in some snowflakes. So I have the Lavinia Stamp snowflakes, and this is, the snowflakes come with 3 stamps, 2 single stamps, and then a cluster of 3. So I'm just going to use these single stamps at this time. I will bring in that cluster of 3 a little bit later. But for now, I'm just going to bring in the 2 single stamps, and we're going to stamp those at the same time with 2 different colors. I believe that was the Faded Jeans and the Blueprint Sketch. And then I finished off my my wreath there. So now we're going to make a background paper for the wreath portion to be mounted on. So I'm just bringing out my anti-static powder tool here. and I liberally coated my paper with it. And then we're going to stamp the Christmas word stamp in VersaMark. And I did position my stamp kind of out there in the middle in hopes that I would be able to stamp this whole background piece without moving my stamp, and that did not work out so well. But for the most part, I got it mostly stamped without having to move my stamp. So we're just going to slide the paper over, and then I'm going to do the second stamping here. And that's going to stamp off the edge a little bit. We're going to ink that up with VersaMark again. I'm going to stamp that down. And so I did want these to be slightly offset. So when I stamped the third one, at first I was going to line it up with how that second stamping was, and then I realized I wanted it to be offset, even though my panel is going to cover a good portion of this, but I did want it to be slightly offset. So you're going to see that I did line this up, and then I'm going to scoot that paper over so it is offset and looks more like, you know, a random pattern on the pattern paper. So I'm lining that up, and then I'm like, oh no, I want to scoot this over so it's not perfectly lined up, and we don't have a whole, you know, a line down the middle of the paper where there are no words. So I'm scooting that over to make sure that it does not line up perfectly. There we go. Then we're going to stamp that down. And then when I do this last stamping here, I realize that I'm going to have to move my stamp because that's not going to work. So I'm just going to pick this up, and I should have cleaned and dried my stamp off, but I didn't. So we're going to line that up. I'm going to stick it down, and I did not stick my magnets. Oh, no, yes, I did. Never mind. I lie. I stuck my magnet down, and I was hoping that there was enough VersaMark left over on my stamp, but there wasn't. So I did re-ink it here, and I stamp it down, and I got a slight halo, but in the end, it really doesn't matter. It didn't look that bad. I don't think anybody is going to notice that the bottom corner words are slightly thicker than the rest of it. And now I'm just going to cover it with clear embossing powder from Ranger, and we're going to heat emboss that off screen. So now I've got a background piece for my card, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment and some fairies. So I'm using the Fairy Merry Christmas from Lavinia Stamps, and I'm going to stamp that in some Festive Berries Distress Oxide. And off screen, I will cut that with the MFT Slanted Sentiment Strip dies. And then we're going to, after I'm done stamping this, I'm going to bring out the 3 Dancing Fairies from Lavinia Stamps. And I will be stamping those as well. Here in a second. There they are. I'm going to stamp these in VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink. And off screen, I cut these out with my scanning cut. The scanning cut didn't get a perfect cut because these are kind of small, intricate images, but I just went around the edges with a black marker and just kind of filled in the areas that wasn't perfect, and nobody's really going to know. So I did bring out my Sakura Quickie glue pen, and I'm just going to fill in the little white parts on the wings and let that dry. I'm not going to show you the whole part here. I have a problem with this Quickie glue pen. I intend to, like, it doesn't come out, and then I push a little hard on the nib, and then I get little splats of glue. So I do bring out a Q-tip to kind of sop up the little puddles of glue. So I'm not going to show you all 3 of these, obviously, because my hand's mostly in the way, but I am filling in the little white parts on the wings. And then I'm going to set that aside to dry, because this is a 2-way glue pen. It's going to come out blue, and then it's going to dry clear. And when it dries, it is tacky. And when it dries, we're going to put glitter on it, but that's going to be here in a little bit after we assemble part of the card here. So I'm putting some score tape on the back of my wreath piece here, and I put score tape all along the edges, and then I'm just going to peel up the corners here just to give me a little bit of room to, a little bit of wiggle room. So the edges are the corners are tacky, and I'm going to stick it down exactly where I want it, press it down, and once it's where I want it, then I will remove the rest of the backing paper. This way, if I don't get it exactly where I want it, it's a lot easier to pull up off the paper than if I had all the sticky down, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. With glitter paper, it probably isn't as bad because, you know, the adhesive doesn't stick to glitter paper quite as easily as it does to regular paper. But this technique is a lot works a lot better when you're sticking paper, regular paper to regular paper, because that score tape is sticky. And if you put it down where you don't want it and you try to pull it up, it's a mess. So now I'm going to stick some foam tape on the back of this panel, and then I will stick this panel to my background panel that I made with that Christmas word stamp. So we're just going to get that down here, line it up where I want it. I will have to stick my head in the way. Sorry about that. And my crazy hair. And then we're going to put some foam tape on the back of this sentiment strip and stick that down as well. Then we'll go back to those fairies because they are good and dry now. I'm just going to get that sentiment strip on there and cut the little excess off. All right. So now we are back to the fairies, and I've got some Fairy Hugs glitter powder in the translucent pearl, and I'm just sprinkling that over the wings. And we're just gonna flick off the excess, probably we're gonna rub some of it off too, because not all of it got flicked off. It's kind of all over the place, you know how glitter goes. So I'm just gonna rub off some of that excess that's where I don't want it, and then we'll put the rest of the glitter back in the jar where it belongs. And I do off screen, I take a Swiffer dry mop cloth and wipe my desk off because some of the glitter got on my desk, and I really don't like glitter everywhere. So now I'm just going to glue these fairies to parts of the wreath, kind of make it look like they're decorating the wreath. I thought that was a cute idea. And these little fairies are perfect size for this wreath. So I glued this one in the middle, kind of fill in that little middle gap there. And then I'm going to glue the other two on the corresponding sides, so they are kind of facing towards the middle. And I'm going to get glue on all their little arms and legs so they don't get bent up when they're coming out of the envelope or anything like that. So we're just going to glue those down. And then I decided that the middle fairy looked kind of weird, like she was reaching out to nothing. So I took that stamp that had the 3 snowflakes that we talked about earlier, and I just stamped those 3 snowflakes right above her arm, so it looked like she was reaching out towards the snowflakes, and I thought that looked pretty good. So we're going to put the card panel onto our card base real quick, and then we're going to grab some Nuvo drops. And for those that struggle with Nuvo drops, I work in a cold basement, so my Nuvo drops kind of get cold and thick. So I do put my Nuvo drops in my bra to warm them up. And I know that sounds funny. Everybody always laughs at me when I say this, but that's what I do. And so I put them in there for, like 5 minutes or so, get them nice and toasty warm. And then I can use them, and they come out of the bottle pretty good. I do hate these little bottles, but if I didn't warm them up, it would be really hard to use them. So the first ones that I was using were Holiday Cheer, and now on the smaller berries for the holly berries, I used Ruby Slippers. So they're just slightly different reds, and I thought that looked nice, that the holly and the mistletoe had different reds on it. Now, the ones that are really close together, they are going to kind of merge together a little bit. If you don't want that to happen, then you will need to do them separately, let them dry, and then do the ones next to each other after the other ones have dried. So that finishes up my card today. I hope that you enjoyed it. As always, links to the products are in the description box below. There are links to Lavinia World Store in the Facebook group, and links to my personal channel as well. As always, have a great day.